M1 Mac Mini is said to be one of the best computers you can buy in 2021, but is it worth buying in the world of Intel and AMD? Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Yoni, I'm a self-taught web developer, and around a month ago I pulled the trigger on buying an M1 Mac Mini. If you follow me on Instagram, you will know that I already owned a 2019 MacBook Pro, so why buy an M1 Mac Mini? Well, 1. Less heat. My MacBook Pro would tend to get extremely hot, and as the computer got hotter, the fans would kick on to cool down the computer, but the fans ended up not helping the computer stay cool, and the computer was just loud and hot. Just like anyone did when the M1 first came out. I watched all the videos and read all the articles. I read everywhere the M1 is the fastest computer you can buy, ever in fact. So I'm glad to report back to you almost a month later that in fact that statement is true. The M1 Mac Mini is the fastest computer I've ever owned, and the fastest computer I'm going to own for a while. In fact, the M1 is so powerful it even beats out some of Apple's higher end laptops, for example the 60-inch MacBook Pro, which is well over $1,000 more. One of the main reasons I bought the M1 Mac Mini was of course for Apple's first ever custom silicon known as the M1. Oh yeah, and of course the Flex Law. As mentioned before, this is Apple's first attempt at an ARM-powered silicon. This means that this chip is very similar to a chip you'd find on an iPhone or iPad. Because the chips you find on your iPhone or iPad are very similar to M1 now, you are able to run iOS apps directly on your computer now. And yes, you can run apps on your Mac, but it doesn't particularly work too well, to be honest, as your Mac doesn't have touch input using your cursor as a finger, which is why when an app requires multi-touch gestures, which most apps do, it doesn't work particularly too well. Some apps won't even be the right orientation in the first place. The RAM on the M1 is integrated in the same package that contains the M1 itself. Henceforth, you can upgrade the RAM on the M1, although you may not even need to upgrade your RAM. So far, the M1 has managed RAM a lot better than my MacBook Pro. In fact, any computer I've ever owned it's managed RAM better than. The M1 chip also gives your computer a lot better battery life. Sadly though, I only have an M1 Mac Mini and I can't report back to you how the battery performs on a MacBook Pro and a MacBook Air. From what I've read online, no, you can get up to 2 days of battery life on your MacBook Pro and MacBook Air now, which is pretty insane compared to my MacBook Pro that only lasts 4 hours. Typically, the apps you find on your MacBook are made for x86, also known as Intel, so that can be a bit of an issue when trying to run x86 apps on your Mac Mini, your M1 chip, which is not x86 at all. That's where Rosetta 2 comes in. Rosetta 2 translates the code of x86 and allows you to run x86 apps on your ARM-based machine. Some apps don't work properly on Rosetta, but 90% of the big apps you use are most likely already supported in M1, as Apple are one of the biggest companies in the world and these apps don't want to lose out on market share. Some apps do actually run better through Rosetta 2 than they do natively on Intel, which is quite embarrassing for Intel. Microsoft do offer an ARM-based computer known as the Microsoft Surface Pro X, so why buy a Mac? Well, first of all, Microsoft don't offer anything such as Rosetta 2, therefore means if you're trying to run anything that hasn't been coded to work on ARM, you're going to be in big trouble. You won't be able to run that app at all. But what if you need Windows? Microsoft won't allow you to download an ARM-based version of Windows natively on your M1 computer, sadly. But there are still ways to get Windows running on your M1 Mac, of course. In fact, you'll be surprised to hear that running Windows on an M1 Mac, keep in mind this isn't native, it's faster than the Surface Pro X running Windows natively, which is quite embarrassing for Microsoft if I do say so myself. But who should actually buy the M1? Well, there are some reasons why you may want to buy it, some reasons why you may not. Some of the reasons I'd say not to buy it, well, A, these are first generation products, which means if things can break, there's going to be bugs, there's going to be glitches. And because these are first generation products, a lot of the small apps won't work on these computers for a while. The M1 Mac Mini only supports up to 16GB of RAM, and you can't even plug in an eGPU, and for some professional workflows that's a big bottleneck. But don't worry, there's a 14-inch MacBook Pro just around the corner. This 14-inch MacBook Pro is rumored to have a faster M1 chip, more RAM, and a GPU. In fact, Apple even getting rid of the Touch Bar in this generation, which is pretty crazy to think considering how stubborn Apple were to remove it in the first place. Apple even giving the MacBook Pro 16-inch the same treatment. And there are not many reasons to buy an M1 in my opinion right now, unless you're a coder you can get away with it, or video editing. But video editing only really works on a Final Cut Pro X, as Adobe Premiere, of what I've heard, does not work very well on the M1 right now. One of the things I can definitely report back to you is coding on the M1, and coding on the M1 is like a godsend compared to my MacBook Pro. When coding, I typically have 6-7 Surface running, I know it's way too much, 20-30 Chrome tabs open, and 7-13 apps, which is all quite a lot for machine only has 8GB of RAM. And while when coding, I haven't broken a thing once, it hasn't slowed down once, nothing's lagged, which is amazing. Compared to my MacBook Pro, that'd be running a Discord call, watching a movie, and it'd be way too hot to do anything. Coding on the M1 is pretty good, although I would stay away from it if you're using Android Studio. I've heard it turns any computer into a jet engine. I don't do a lot of creative work really. I only edit some pictures for Instagram, although in editing pictures it's definitely a lot snappier than my MacBook Pro. I notice I'm removing cables and stuff from images. It definitely feels a lot faster on my MacBook. And when opening Final Cut Pro on my MacBook, that would take around 5-10 minutes, and it would take another 10 minutes to load the timeline over the library. It would take way too long. My M1 Mac Mini, the first time I opened up Final Cut Pro, I got the world's biggest shock how fast it was. So far, the M1 Mac Mini has been an amazing improvement over my MacBook Pro of yesteryear. Oh, and look forward for 6 months time when I'm going to be doing a follow-up review on the M1 Mac Mini. If you enjoyed this video, then you'll love my previous video showing you how to get started in web development. Thanks for watching and see you later.